This meeting is being recorded.
We'll kick this one off. Good afternoon, everybody. And hold on, we got one or two more people coming in the waiting room. All right, there's Dan, Robert, and that's all I see for right now. All right, we will keep the waiting room open here and we will kick things off. So welcome back to another, Tuesday DaaS Sales Workshop. I see quite a few familiar faces and then one or two people that I just met for the first time here in the last week or so. So it's good to see a new face or two, and then definitely Dan, you're here regularly. Georgetta, you're here regularly. Heidi, you and Jim I spoke with recently, and I know you joined one recently. Nice to see you on again. Hopefully you've got some progress since we last spoke. We can discuss that a little too when we get to some time for a Q&A. Oh, there's one or two more just coming in that I'm not that familiar with. So good. Good to see a blend as usual. As I usually say on these guys, some things will always be redundant if you're attending every week. But I try to bring, new lessons and new topics, new sessions, really new workshops, week in, week out. So there's always going to be a little redundancy. But the first thing I always cover and give away on each one of my workshops each week, especially to a couple of you that are newer here or may not, yet attended one of my workshops. Unless you've had a one-on-one call with me and I sent this to you after, this is something you've probably not received yet. And I just give this away at the beginning of each one of these sessions, guys. So really quickly, this is just the best document and resources I could put together for building out a full data agency sales process. Everything you need in here from, needing to know what type of sales process it is, how it works, our ads, our messaging, the scripts, the triage call script, number 4 on my screen, the sales call or demo call script, number 5 on my screen, the pitch deck that you guys can utilize, make a copy and add to it, subtract from it, but the pitch deck we give you to use on sales presentations. Also, Pixel, if it'd be nice if I could speak right, Pixel calculator tools that help us kind of really just show potential clients if we think the Pixel's a good fit, what kind of revenue they're leaving on the table. So within number 7 on the screen here, guys, within that video down in the description is the actual link to that Pixel calculator. And by just simply entering in the number of traffic they're currently getting per month, the average order value of their product or service, the average conversion rate currently on their website or landing page, we can kind of show them what's being left on the table by not utilizing ID resolution. And in many cases, it's a no-brainer when they're leaving 40, 50, 60, 100K, and even up, depending on, the amount of traffic and the amount of their order volume, average order value. And then the last thing on the screen here, number 8 on this particular document, is just about 20 or so of my sales calls recordings. For you guys that don't know, I'm a co-owner here at Audience Lab. I built the sales team. I was the first sales rep and the sales team initially until, we've been in business for a few years now and we have multiple reps, and I'm at a point where I just oversee and manage the sales team. I actually do that in quite a few different businesses and offers, but it'd be very hypocritical if I was a sales expert and didn't build my own sales team. So I certainly did, and as I like to say, I practice what I preach. So you can see that. Let me give you some of my call recordings here, my verbiage, my tonality, cadence, right? Anything you can pick up and implement into your process to make that better is a bonus. So I am going to go right now. Hold on one second. I see another person in the waiting room. So let me just admit them. So guys, that document I just went over and covered that I'm going to give away is the link right now here in the chat on the Zoom room. So I just posted that, the Google Doc link that is from my name. Feel free to click on that, star it, save it. There's going to be some value resources in any capacity of selling data agency high ticket services. There's going to be something you can pull out of there. So that is that document, and that's where I like to start. Now, guys, as we're going, I'm going to open up time at the end of the lesson for a Q&A. But as we're going, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or just type a 1 if you're going to want me to call on you as we get to the end, just so I know who to call on. Again, I will say this again toward the end, but I kind of always joke, and it's not really a joke because there's half truth to it, but I'm the type of person, if I don't kind of jot down a question or write it down or type it out while I'm thinking about it, if you call on me 20 minutes later, I might have a totally different train of thought. So if you're similar, just, take a note or jot it in the chat as soon as you remember it, and I'll circle back to it. Or again, just type a 1 in the chat and I'll call on you toward the end when we get to the Q&A, which I already see 1 or 2 of you doing. So great. I want to go into kind of today's lesson. And then again, you may have questions on anything outside of today's lesson, just to do with sales, overcoming objections, pricing, any of that kind of stuff. Feel free to ask. It doesn't just have to be applicable to today's lesson. Any questions to do with sales or marketing or the messaging or anything to do really with the front end of, landing and closing data clients. But where I want to start is for any of you guys, I know there's a couple newer faces and a couple newer members that probably weren't even, an Audience Lab client last week. What I covered last week within the document that I just gave to all you guys in there, number 4 and 5, the scripts. Last week's full session, I spent about 40 minutes reading and elaborating on those scripts and exactly how I would use it and what I would customize. So again, last week's replay is always within the school community. I go and drop the replay at the end of each day. So again, give it 2 hours after today's session, they'll be uploaded in school. Or if you ever can't find them or want them, just DM me. Hey, Ray, I want this week's, DaaS workshop, last week's DaaS workshop, and I'll just send you the link directly. But those are always there. And I just wanted to say, last week we spent a lot of time on the scripts. Today, I kind of want to go back to the beginning and the foundations of how we build out any marketing, messaging, sales team within, first off, all 3 businesses that I'm a co-owner of, but more so, I can't even tell you the number of client businesses that I've taught this to and implemented it in addition to my own businesses and offers. So where everything starts from comes back to what we call the PDOCS method. Some of you guys may have heard me talk about this before. Some of you guys may have been past PDOCS students. For anyone that doesn't know, very, very quickly, PDOCS was our first company, myself, Adam, and Jesse, before Audience Lab was ever even a thought, I would go as far to say. And PDOCS is really a company, is really a brand all about communication. And there's a few components that make that up, as you see here on the screen. The research, identifying PDOCS, transitional messaging, testing and validating, both messages, offers, all that stuff. We'll talk about that a little more. Optimization, constant tweaks and opening up that feedback loop, and then learning how to shelve losing campaigns, losing messaging, losing ads, and how to scale winners. And ultimately, that's what we do within all our brands. It's just kind of that on rinse and repeat. Doesn't matter, guys, if we're doing this with organic, if we're doing this with email, if I'm doing this with DMs, if I'm running an ad campaigns, we still got to get this right. We still got to identify the proper, and again, PDOCS, pains, desires, obstacles, common beliefs, and steroids within any marketplace, right? All of our messaging is usually geared around those things if you think about it. And just to break it down a little further, the only one I really get questions on with that is the last two. Sometimes people are like, common beliefs, self-explanatory. Sometimes I would even put a backslash, though, with a lot of my messaging and say market misconceptions. So common beliefs and market misconceptions can kind of both fall in that same category. And a lot of times people are kind of unsure what steroids are. Steroids are just anything that accelerates the eyeballs on your offer. So maybe mentioning a big influencer that you did a teaching for or a training for that sparks more eyeballs on your stuff. I might say, hey, I ran this great organic training that Russell Brunson actually asked me to throw into his client portal so they could learn the method because they thought I did it better than them. That would be a steroid that would probably get more eyeballs. And usually, again, an influencer is just one example. Could be a big category king, but anything that a majority of your market can relate to, right? And it kind of blows it up and gets more engagement. And I always say, including steroids that would attract your ideal audience while repelling your not ideal audience. For instance, generally speaking, if you've never heard of Russell Brunson, you're probably never going to work with any of my companies and buy any of my products because they all revolve around sales and marketing. So that's one that I know if people, blow up and know that name and it, creates some intrigue or engagement, that's probably my ideal audience. So on and so forth. So that's just a quick example. And I'm going to dive into these a little deeper. But that's the foundation of PDOCS. So again, I kind of already went through this, but what is PDOCS? Pains or problems, desires, obstacles, common beliefs, and or steroids. And what we first did when we launched PDOCS is we taught this exact communication system to a team of virtual assistants that we had booking appointments for high ticket offers and services on autopilot, just using our methodology, really. At this point, guys, we've had over 3,000 paying students and clients come through our PDOCS programs, trainings, and it's mostly geared around copywriting, messaging, offer creation, understanding knowledge gaps, which you probably hear me talk about a lot, which we're not going to dive into too much with today's training. But a knowledge gap is really just an entry point into a conversation with your market where it's something that they did not already know, basically. And that starts the whole process of what we do with a prospect's psychological state in any process is we're kind of making them say like, hey, what Ray said, nobody's really told me before. I'd that makes a lot of sense. I'd like to find out more. That's kind of what we're doing over and over again. And the knowledge gap is what injects that conversation the first time to say, oh shit, nobody's really said that to me before. That's kind of what that means, just in short. I'll talk about it more when we kind of cover it in a lesson. So PDOCS, what it really equates to is the cognitive bias within your marketplace. So just so you guys understand, and I'm sure most of you do, but not everybody does, a cognitive bias is really just a systematic error in thinking that occurs when people are processing and interpreting information in the world around them, and it really affects the decisions and judgments that they make. Buying decisions, non-buying decisions. This can go down to anything with weight loss, transformational stuff, imposter syndrome. It all kind of falls within that. We can break it down to any niche, any industry, any angle, so on and so forth. So to understand those, a lot of times it's good to understand what are some of the emotional and physical pains that come with this. So as I always like to say, what's the difference between like an emotional and a physical pain when we're trying to understand from a marketing standpoint? I think there's a very good topic that not a lot of people talk about. And it's very hard if nobody's really walked you through it to be able to isolate and identify those so you can actually create the right messaging and the right copy. But a physical pain is something in the here and now. What keeps them up at night tonight? What are they worried about now? What pains are they going through on a daily basis? Emotional is either future pacing or past tense. Hey, I've overcome this problem in the past. It sounds like you're dealing with it now. That's more of an emotional thing where they're thinking back to when they struggle with this, or they're thinking forward to, you're right, if I don't lose that weight, I probably won't be healthy enough to walk my daughter down the aisle. That's more emotional when they're not thinking right in the now, but they're future or past tensing their problems. Physical pains are more in the now. A physical pain is lack of revenue, lack of lead, right? Like tangible things you can see in the business right now. Those would be more of kind of the physical pains. So understanding the difference between emotional pains, physical pains, and things like that are kind of essential in our marketing. I think a lot of times we just think about pains, but it's good to break them down to, am I marketing to like a pain now, or am I marketing to a future or a past version of themselves in that pain point? Because if you guys never thought about it when I just said this, I'm sure you guys are thinking in your head like, oh yeah, I remember offers where they were kind of going to my future self or my past self and trying to pitch me on that problem. Sometimes if you don't realize, what's happening until like you understand the foundation and the frameworks that, went into that marketing. We've all been like that. I remember the first funnel or two that I went through and bought from. And then once I learned the actual psychology of a funnel, I'm like, oh, I see why that got me. Like, I understand why I clicked that freaking button, right? I think we've all had that kind of aha moment in our time online. And the PDOCS guys are what we are identifying right off the bat, knowledge gaps, symptom level elements that you need to to engage what we call the croc brain, right? So what that means is there's kind of a shortcut in people's decision-making process, which is really based on a single problem, solution, idea, angle, so on and so forth. And it could be a number of things. So just a couple quick examples for, very general brands or general problems. Let's say this one, example one, when buying moisturizer, the cognitive bias the average person has about that product or what brand to choose could be whether or not it gives them a greasy feeling, right? The moisturizer. Or when buying a weight loss supplement, the cognitive bias a lot of people have is how it tastes or how many flavors they have, right? If I can actually ingest something in my body that I don't feel like is going to make me puke and gag, that's how we see a good a buying point and a good way to trigger somebody's croc brain. It's what they're thinking about and what they see in the immediate. When they put it in their mouth, does it taste good or bad? They can get an immediate reaction to that. So those are the type of things we're talking about. So what we realize with PDOCS is the hyper relevant pain, desire, obstacle, common belief, steroid, et cetera, that triggers attention instantly, right? And that's what any good marketing does. It triggers attention and then ultimately curiosity, intrigue, interest, right? Those are the next things. But at first we got to get their attention, right? So it's our job to identify the cognitive bias in our market, our niche, our industry, and really understand and do a little research on the PDOCS. Luckily for you guys, and a lot of you guys that join with Audience Lab are existing agencies. You have a pretty good marketing brain, background, understanding. You've taken courses, you've read books. So this stuff isn't all, what I would say brand new to you. But where a lot of people struggle is even having the understanding of all those things, reading books, taking courses, being an agency, doesn't necessarily mean they understand the execution and the SOPs that go into how to do it in the proper sequential order to get it to work, right? I've worked with a lot of business owners where it's just like sometimes everything is good, And they're wondering why am I not getting results? And sometimes it's just like one little tweak or one thing needs to connect. And then that whole big machine where everything behind it in your mind, you're like, oh, it's good. It's making sense. And somebody comes in from the outside that maybe doesn't have the bias of the business owner, that can give it a little more of a, 30,000-foot overview, for lack of a better phrase. And they're like, hey, man, did you ever think about tweaking this hook or this angle or this CTA? And sometimes it's that little thing that makes everything flow together. It's ironic, but it's certainly true. And what I was talking about there when I was kind of saying, our understanding of marketing, a lot of times we will bring up and people will bring up whether, we bring it to their attention, whether we ask a question and they say it first, doesn't really matter. But a lot of times we talk about symptom or surface level problems. And then what we need to dig into to give the effective recommendations, solutions, suggestions, pitches, all that stuff is we need to dive into below the symptom or surface level and find what I call the root or the real problem that is down below that. So sometimes the surface level problem could be like just not enough sales. Okay, now to know why that is, I might ask something like, how long has this been a problem? What have you already tried to solve this problem? What's going to happen if you don't get this problem solved in the next 3, 6, 9 months in your business? So now I can get to more the deeper, root or real problem that's below that surface level problem of just not enough sales, right? That's very, very vague. Usually, me reverse engineering KPIs when it's just not enough sales, it usually comes down to poor talent, poor scripts and messaging, or poor tracking and accountability. It's usually one of those three areas, but that's such a vague problem. I'm not just going to guess and throw those three things at it. I'm going to specify, ask a couple questions, and then identify the one of those that really is the impactful thing. And that's what we want to point out first. We always want to, whether we're doing this on sales calls, in our marketing, in our advertising, on our landing page, in our headline, we should always be really tying people down or trying to get across just one thing, one angle, one hook, one problem. Almost all of my marketing, you guys have heard me talk about this before, and messaging usually revolves around three components. And that is kind of dependent on identifying and knowing the sophistication level of the audience, which one of these three I'm using. But I'm pretty much always highlighting problems, solutions, and results/outcomes. Those three things. A more sophisticated audience, I'm going to steer more toward results, outcomes, and maybe solutions. A more lower sophistication audience, I'm going to stick more around problem-based. Do I need to make them problem aware? And actually, I'm gonna dive into that here momentarily in a second. But yeah, so very, very interesting to kind of dive into the root problems from the symptom level problem and not just stay on that. And why I highlighted that, guys, is a lot of times a business owner might come to you and say, hey, man, my ads just aren't performing good enough. I'm just not getting good enough leads. And rather than just say right away, hey, try my product, by asking a couple more questions and isolating it down, you can say, hey, you know what I would do? I would build an in-market audience just going after the direct-to-consumer. Then I would take this audience and not go and use Facebook's, pardon my French, kind of crappy targeting parameters, but I would build this audience in a private database that I have access to, and then loop it right into your ad manager, totally eliminate or circumvent Facebook's targeting parameters, run your creative right there, and almost instantly see a better, ratio and cost per lead, cost per acquisition. So again, I want to tie them down to one main thing, and then I can recommend and suggest the solution that really, again, no matter what we're doing in people's businesses, we might have lots of solutions, lots of deliverables. We might be solving multiple problems, but what they're really willing to pay for is solving problem 1 and 2 in their business. If you could solve problem 4, 5, and 6, but not 1 and 2, nobody really cares. Nobody's going to pay a high ticket value for that, right? They really want problem 1 and 2 solved. And a lot of times we need to identify that, whether that's through assessment, conversations, questions, right? All the things we talk about in our sales process. But one of the best ways to do that is through transitional messaging. So transitional messaging is what I was just talking about. Identifying the symptom level pain and transitioning into the real pain. And this process takes people from what we call unaware to problem aware in most cases. I'm going to cover in a little bit more of the awareness levels so you guys can understand the core different 6 phases of that any prospect has. For any of you guys that haven't seen my training on that particular sophistication level, I'm going to dive into that. But I just don't want to skip ahead a bunch of slides right now. So that will all kind of come together and make sense. But generally, we have unaware, we have problem aware, we have solution aware, we have product aware, we have offer aware, and there's a couple more within between there. But unaware just simply means like, I usually give the example with data, right? Like, hey, man, you might be unaware that you can actually compete with an insert category king, right? If we're in retail, I might say Walmart or Target or whatever. But hey, you're never going to have the budget, so you feel like you can't compare on, your cost per acquisition and your cost per lead when you're running paid ads. But what if you had access to the exact same database and the data platform that the Fortune 100 companies are using, and you could actually dollar for dollar compete? Now, will you ever have the same ad budget as Walmart? Highly unlikely. But what if you could acquire a client for the same cost as them? Would that make you more competitive? So now I just took them from unaware. They were, in their mind, they think I can never compete with this guy because of their brand, their budget, their recognition. Whereas now, like, oh, I actually have access and I can get to the same data those companies had. I never even thought that was feasible for a little mom and pop like me or whatever. So that would take them from unaware to problem aware, and then they're going to probably want to start hearing about the solution next. And the solution would be building in market audiences, slapping a super pixel on, whatever it is in that case, right? So again, we do this whole process by creating cognitive dissonance, where we use PDOCS to then engage, introduce a new idea that kind of goes against the current beliefs, right? And that's kind of exactly how that works. So testing and validating is obviously a constant. It's a constant thing in any business, any offer. We should be testing and validating our subject lines, our open rates, our reply rates. If I'm not, again, in this case, I'm just talking about email campaigns. We should be doing the same in ad campaigns with subject lines, with headlines, with different creative. Is still image getting better results than video image? And we should always be kind of split testing and opening up what we call the feedback loop. Now, if we're doing that organically, it's really about just getting in conversations with your market, right? Hearing their apprehension, their objections, their hesitancy to want to join. Maybe it's with you, maybe it's trust, maybe it's with the product itself, right? But understanding all that stuff helps us go back and craft messaging that we can now pre-frame our next person, so they're not going to have that objection. They're not going to have that hesitancy. I like to say early on when I'm launching any new offer and taking sales calls, sometimes the objections I get when I don't close are actually more valuable than trying to really push that guy and close a deal that might not be a great fit. That objection I can take back and say, okay, I see where he's coming from. Let me go back and tweak this in my funnel and create a little 3-minute video explaining this, and nobody will have that thought process anymore. And I can reverse engineer that, right? So the feedback loop is literally just engaging and conversing with your marketplace and finding out their thoughts, their pains, obstacles, desires, hesitations, apprehensions, objections, all of those things. And then, figuring out what we can do to overcome them with content, with master classes, with a Google Doc, with a PDF, with a one-on-one call. What is that going to be in my process? And again, on that document I shared at the top of today's meeting there in the Zoom chat, that kind of walks you through everything you need to know with that. So once we get that feedback loop, then we do constant optimization. And this is where we begin using what we call gap analysis to find out how we can make each aspect better. In this case, let's make the message better and increase conversion rate. And then, we walk you through exactly how to do this kind of stuff. And that's kind of what I'm going through today. This last thing is just showing an image of one of our Trello boards, which we might have merged to different platform where we're storing this now. I don't know. I think we should probably still have Trello, but that was just an old image on my screen. But really, what we do is we build out what's called a star board. And I have a whole training on this, and I have access where you guys can go create your own star board. I already kind of have the blueprint, the bones to it. You would just customize it to whatever you need. But this is where we have a star board of all of our current projects. So might say email campaigns, want to launch ads and doing organic outreach. And then this is the creative I need, or the scripts. And then this is the day that should launch. And this is how many messages should go out. And just everything is itemized in its own column and moves down the workflow. Column 1, it's just in its kind of ideation stage, right? We're just coming up with the ideas. Number 2 is, putting together frameworks, SOPs and templates. Number 3 is actually, setting it dates we're going to go live. Number 4 is different angles or versions. We might have one creative for an ad or an email, but we might have 6 different hooks or angles or openers that we want to split test. So again, we build this into boards and we kind of move them through the work phase. And then at the end, what we really have is a winners and losers column, winner and loser column, where we kind of scale the winners. If it's winning campaigns and the conversion rates and the open rates or the cost per lead or whatever metric is kind of driving that campaign is great, we're going to scale it up and double down on, triple down on the messaging, the ad spend, whatever. If it's losing or it's not where we want it to be, we're going to shelve it and put it down for testing and figure out why. Normally, what we've found, if we go through this process, we get to the end and something's a loser, it's usually what I was saying earlier about like a whole business process. It's just a subtle tweak we go back and retest it and it can win. So a lot of times we'll shelve losers and we'll put a different angle, a different opener, a different headline, a different creative, retest it, and a lot of times it will hit. Now, sometimes we'll always create losers, a losing message, a losing ad, a losing campaign. The sooner we can identify that and realize that, the sooner we can shut down the ad spend or the email, bandwidth that's going behind that we're wasting in essence, right? So, that's a good little overview at that. Now, how we internally and any of the clients that I've ever worked with in PDOCS, how they use this to kind of explode their business is again the 5 steps that we talked about. At first, you go and you do the research and identify all the PDOCS, right? Then you create new messaging, knowledge gaps, which we can ultimately transition in conversations and find out real problems instead of surface level problems. We will start to get feedback. We will optimize it. We will validate. You're either going to validate or you're going to optimize with feedback once you start getting the sales call. Validate means somebody's going to pull out their credit card and pay you and swipe. Or the feedback is I've taken 20 sales calls and I haven't closed one deal. Now I need to go back and tweak something. Is it price? Is it how it's being presented? Normally with an offer, guys, it comes down to 4 key areas. I like to say how I pressure test an offer, and that's how it's packaged, position, price, and the perceived value being shown to the market. Sometimes only one of those 4 things is off, your offer won't sell. And that's something I do with private clients in PDOCS is I'll look at their offer and I'll run it through my pressure testing, or I'll have them craft it in a different manner so it actually will sell. Some people just don't have the same vision about seeing what's missing with an offer or why it's not converting or what needs to be tweaked. And they just kind of throw their hands up and they're like, why is nobody buying my stuff, right? Usually comes down to one of those 4 categories I just mentioned within the offer. And then we would optimize. I would tweak that. If I realized after enough calls, shit, I'm charging too much for this market, I got to drop the price. Or, hey, I'm not showing the right perceived value. That means my messaging isn't dialed in, or I'm not hitting the right market. So now I need to go back and figure that out. But I can always kind of isolate it back down to 1 or 2 things rather than just saying it doesn't work, throw my hands up and start again from scratch. No, a lot of this is good. I just got to retarget, or I just got to tweak this message. It's usually just one thing again. And then again, we scale winners, shelve losers, build out what we call self-liquidating offers in a lot of our businesses. And then, as we've done and I don't even know how many of our DaaS agencies are now, but many people have been able to scale past 50K, 100K. One of the better DaaS clients I spoke with last week was doing 450K a month. So that guy's probably in the upper tier, at least of the people I speak to. We still have all kinds of DaaS clients that have been on the platform for a year. They're out there crushing it, that they don't show up to these anymore. They don't need to. They have it stuff figured out. They'll show up if they have a tech question. But generally speaking, once you've been able to sell this and you've grown to 6 figures a month, you don't really need to join a sales workshop and figure out your messaging again, right? So like those guys, I don't even hear from those guys anymore, which is both good and bad. It's not a bad thing to not hear from them, but I like the constant feedback and hearing when people are crushing it. And I get it. When you're out really being successful, I wouldn't be spending my time going to workshops either. I would be making more success. I'd be fulfilling more. I'd be selling more. I wouldn't be attending workshops if everything's working, right? So 4 things that I always say are relevant to move forward with any business and any offer is understanding unaware versus problem aware. I'm going to dive into that more in a minute. Understanding pressure testing your offer and finding the gaps. I just kind of touched on that. Identifying knowledge gaps. I'll probably spend a whole other session on that because that's a little too long to fit into what I need to do today. And I don't like to rush through something if I can't give the proper explanation. It's really not beneficial for anybody. And then map out transitional messaging to create problem-aware prospects, which really means the ability to create your own prospect, right? Something that we talk about a lot, and what we like to call the whole grail of client acquisition is the biggest strategy. And we've probably all seen certain other gurus or influencers or ads or something talking about this. But so you can never have an empty pipeline again. You have to have the ability to actually create your own clients. And you do that from bringing somebody from unaware to problem aware. If somebody's unaware and then you make them problem aware, well, now when you inject the solution, you're going to be the first person to inject that solution because they didn't even know the problem existed before your conversation, right? So that's how you can create your own customer. And you're already building up trust. Again, they're like, oh shit, what he said totally makes sense. No one's really said that to me before. Tell me more about the solution, Ray. Okay, now I tell them about that. Dude, that sounds like it. Tell me more about how it costs, how it works. Cool. Now I'm getting into buying questions, right? Taking somebody from unaware to in the buying pocket, asking what I would call buying questions. That's the best way to do that. So when I said we probably all seen some type of content, ad, guru, influencer talking about this. I'm talking about kind of this triangle right here, right? Where everybody's like, hey, 17% of the market, and let's say the red on my screen is top of funnel ready to buy today. Then there's 44% that are unaware or let's say solution aware or problem aware. They're out there searching. And then there's the bottom portion, let's say 36%, that's actually unaware of the problem. So I would say yellow, unaware of the problem. So they're totally unaware. In the blue, that would be kind of aware, problem aware, but not yet solution aware, not understanding all the solutions out there. And then red would be more aware. That's when we start to get into product and offer aware, and those are people ready to buy. But what everybody's trying to do is target that 17% at the top of this pyramid rather than a combined of the 83% below that, which we can actually turn a lot of those people into our customers. And that's kind of what I'm talking about here. So again, I just explained it, but the graphic on my screen shows kind of most aware, actively looking to solve the problem, aka your perfect client. Then we have being able to transition the prospect from unaware to problem aware, which is all the way down in the yellow. And then in the middle would be unaware of the solution or the problem and symptom level problems, but they haven't gotten to the root stuff. So yeah, I want to skip down to make sure I have time. Let me just make sure I'm not missing anything too relevant. Yeah, I'll go through one or two more of these, but I want to go down to the awareness chart and then make sure I have time to go back and give you guys a Q&A. But again, I went through a training like this probably a month or two ago. So maybe a few of you on the workshop, you'll remember certain slides in here. I didn't go through all of this and not in this order, but this specific, target on my screen was part of that lesson. It just really shows you how to kind of reverse engineer the different layers or different levels of problems. So in this case, just to make a little more sense of this, the symptom level problem in this case, oh no, this isn't even the right one. So Adam did two separate slides there. This one, okay, so number 2, reverse engineer the journey and how it can be solved, my solution. And this one is based around email deliverability. And this guy runs a couple other services. So email deliverability, SEO stuff, ads. So it's kind of like a full stack agency. And basically where he starts, his red bullet in the center is email deliverability issues. He finds that to be very, very prevalent with his ideal buyers. And then he goes out a little bit. And the next thing would be, having trouble gathering or getting your right customer, no solid back end to increase sales despite ads, relying heavily on new traffic from Facebook, but not so much on a warm network or a nurture pipeline, constantly getting account bans and unable to run traffic. So again, okay, so it does relate to the slide above. But let's say like at this time when this slide was created, a big industry problem was we were hearing a lot of people getting account bans and unable to run traffic. So that might be the outlying, message or angle I would use to get the attention of the masses, the unaware market. And then as I dial more into my ideal client, I can get more to the specific or more to the center of my target here. So there's always different bullet points and they follow a different priority level in terms of chronological order for how that hits your market. This hits like the mass market. This hits a certain percentage of this. This hits a certain percent. This just reaches my ideal client who's ready to buy today, suffering with problem number 1, right? And it's good to know, multiple different avenues and angles, for how to go through that. So yeah, let me scroll down. Give me 1 second. I want to scroll down and go through some of the awareness levels, and I want to go to a bit of a Q&A. So that's down on slide 321, if I remember right. Boom, look at that. I may have done this once or twice before. So again, I actually talked with a couple of people that I've done one-on-one calls in the last week or two. This is one thing I highly feel that is vastly undertaught and underemphasized when it comes to marketing. I've just been through, I've worked with, I've helped create a lot of curriculum for marketing programs in some way, shape, or form. And I feel like very few, if any, that I can think of outside of ones I've crafted actually really highlight understanding the market or the prospect sophistication level, which is really, really huge. I know for one company, a company that I used to work for on their high-ticket sales team back in 2019 and 2020, this was actually the secret sauce that they intentionally didn't teach their clients. Like it wasn't in their program. They're like, hey, pay us 10K and we'll show you exactly how we get clients. They left out this one thing and they did it very specifically. They knew people didn't figure this out. They could never put together everything, which I found kind of repulsive. And I didn't stay with that company very, very long once I kind of figured out how they were operating and some of the stuff going on behind the scenes, but that's a story for another day. Once I really understood the sophistication level and more so how the awareness levels coordinate to prospect sophistication level, it changed everything in my marketing. I mean, that's when I went from when I started out my first offer. For any of you guys that don't know, it was just me and my partner Jesse. It was before I even met Adam. I met Adam doing organic outreach and doing exactly what we're talking about here. And I got him in a Facebook post, into some transitional messaging, then into the DMs. Then I solved the problem for him. Ultimately, I became a business partner with him. But that all happened through doing my organic outreach. And one of the first lessons that he had showed me within PDOCS, and when he showed me this, I went back and tweaked a little bit of stuff that Jesse and I were doing. At the time, we had a two-man offer. We were doing around 10K a month. It was the first real online business that he and I launched together. Within 90 days of implementing this, again, two guys, no ads, no VAs, no nothing, just two guys doing organic outreach. Once we really understood awareness levels, sophistication level, etc., we went to 40K a month within 90 days. And nothing else changed, just us having a better understanding. And at that point, we kind of encapsulated what we were doing into PDOCS, and then I helped Adam run and grow this company. The first year we launched PDOCS, some of you guys may know, we launched actually PDOCS in January of 2021. We did 2.1 million cash collected and 2.1 million invoice and 1.6 million cash collected our first year in business, once I partnered with Adam. And we only had two offers. We had a 7-day challenge and a back-end high-ticket 90-day program, and that was it. And we did that with that. Eventually, we morphed that into our most successful clients from PDOCS, people that came in, say, doing 15K a month, and within 90 days, they were doing 75K a month. That was our ideal client. Once they got to that point, PDOCS was great and they could keep using it, but they didn't learn it again and they weren't going to pay us for anything else. So we realized a lot of those people were starting to go into paid advertising now that they were at 75K a month. Hence, the idea and the origins of Audience Lab were born. Hey, now we need to create some kind of data platform that we can give to all of our advertisers that'll help them get better results. And guys, again, some of you may or may not know, but that 1.6 million that we collected, us three co-owners sunk 1 million and 8 months into the infrastructure for Audience Lab before we ever monetized or made a penny back, just to build out the super graph, everything that went with that. So we took a big gamble on ourselves and ultimately built something, worthwhile and a revolutionary product. But again, that's how we kind of always create everything. We'll create a first offer, and then, hey, once our ideal client gets to a certain level, what are they focusing on now, or what problems are they facing now? Cool, let's go build it out. And that led into me building the Sales Lab and Audience Lab. A lot of my clients are starting to build sales teams. Well, I already have closed over X amount of million in deals. I already have all the SOPs. Why don't I start building out their sales teams for them? That's what led to that happening. And it's really that simple, in my opinion. I think a lot of people overthink. Go talk to your clients, see what they're stuck with, go create a solution to it, and then they'll come back and pay you for it. Again, I think a lot of times we overcomplicate that. Understanding sophistication level, and this is still my favorite book ever, and breakthrough advertising. Hell, when I got into this game, I couldn't even afford the hard copy. I don't know if you guys have ever looked this up, but the hard copy is like over $1,000 when I tried to buy it. But back in that day, I was like, $1,000 on a book? Are you nuts? Hell no. I ended up buying the cheap, like whatever, $75 PDF version or whatever, right? But now I actually have the hard copy. It's still my favorite marketing book, and probably the one I refer back to the most. So if anybody's never heard of Breakthrough Advertising by Eugene Schwartz, let me know. I can actually send you the PDF or the downloadable version, so you don't have to spend $1,000 absolutely free. If anybody wants it, happy to do that. I'm not giving you my hard copy for free because I work for it, but I'll give you my PDF copy. So again, the most important question I like to say is, what does the customer already know, and why is that important, you might be asking? If we can start with talking about what they already know, we can lead them down a path of what they may not yet know, right? So a lot of times we have to relate to somebody. So as I said with my analogy earlier, hey, Joe, you know that you can't compete with Walmart because you don't have the budget they do, right? That's something they already know. But then, did you know that you could have access to, oh shit, now I'm saying something that they did not know, and taking them down that little, hey, what he said made sense. Nobody's mentioned that before. Yeah, Ram, I'm curious. How do I find out more, right? So that's why that's important. So determining your customer sophistication level is also half the battle. I did not necessarily believe that when I first heard it, but telling you the influence it had and the difference it made in my marketing and what we were able to do with a little two-man operation back in 2020 was pretty amazing. It was once we understood that. Will, I'll get to you in just a minute. I'm just going to go through about 2 or 3 more minutes, and then I'll go right to you. Cool. So 6 main lead types. This is what I wanted to go through, and I'm going to show you how these lead types correlate to the awareness or sophistication level of prospects. So actually, I'm going to start at the bottom. This is kind of listed backwards. Let's start at the bottom because the reason I'm doing that is because your least sophisticated audience, somebody that knows nothing about you, somebody that's totally unaware of the problem you solve, you yourself, your brand, your company, your name, just totally unaware. We might start with what we would call a story lead, right? Stories are a great way to build relationships and to get people into our ecosystem. And they help us build up a little bit of that know like trust factor that comes into any real relationship where there is, a sale made or an exchange of value, right? So telling the lead a story, taking the customer down a journey. It might be, hey, when I started my first company at 21, I had no money. So rather than run ads, we spent our time looking for gaps in our competitor's strategy and built out a VA team that could go crush it, right? That might be a great way to intrigue somebody and get them into my ecosystem. Secret leads, which is very simple, right? Creating intrigue with a big secret, revealing the offer. This method can turn 2 hours work into 500 new ads to beat your competitor. That would be a secret lead. We've all heard secrets, and secrets are, I mean, hell, what was it? .com secrets, expert secrets, Travis secrets, right? Russell Brunson builds his whole thing around secrets, basically, and it's a big aspect. Then there's what's called a proclamation lead, which is just a big bold statement made to disarm the reader. Now, this is just kind of a spin-off. I'm not saying this is necessarily the one you use, but this one actually gets a lot of open rates. It actually engages. Just something as simple as read this or die, right? That might incite somebody's attention or reaction. I've said in the past, one of my best email headlines after testing over years has been toxic. Don't open with a skull and crossbones. And then people are like, F you, I'm opening it, Ray. And I have a lot of opens because I told them not to open it. So sometimes it's really just figuring out like the psychology of your market. And sometimes it's just a bold statement that has nothing to do with your offer, but just gets them to click and say, I'm interested, or okay, I'll read this, or whatever, right? Problem solution lead is leading with a big problem that keeps your customer up at night. And I would say taking it one step further, I don't think we put enough of a definition here, but the best problem solution based posts, I guess that would be more of a whole post. The lead is really just leading with a big problem. So that's right. A lead type, really, just to be clear, a lead type should just be what opens, right? Your opener. Meaning I could have the subject of my post or my email or whatever, the meat and potatoes, and I could try that with all 6 different lead types in different groups, and it's going to perform different. And that's why I said when I figured this out, I grew a lot of my initial success. First couple million I closed online were all through organic outreach and DM appointment setting. So what I realized is I was creating a lot of posts that I was like, why wouldn't that hit? And then once I understood this, I went back and tested different lead types, but I didn't change the subject matter, the meat and the potatoes, and they would start to perform. And then I started to realize, oh, I was using, a more sophisticated lead type to a less sophisticated audience. That's why it wasn't working, so on and so forth. And again, I'm going to go make that make sense really quickly. But the whole problem solution formula, if you're creating a whole post, you lead with the big problem, then you talk about the mainstream solution, then you talk about why the mainstream solution is BS, and then you inject your unexpected solution. That would be kind of the whole formula to create a whole post or a whole email, but the lead would still be the big process, that kind of keeps your problem up at night. A big problem, I should say. The next one, a promise appealing to emotional benefits, right? If we were doing a tooth whitening thing, hey, have the whitest smile in the room. We've advertising that appeals to a quick emotional benefit that's going to make somebody smile when they think about that change in their own life or their own appearance or whatever that may be. And an off lead straight to the point. So I really quickly, I want to make this make sense. So right within this graph where I'm kind of hovering my mouse, these are the 6 lead types I've just talked about. Now above are the 5 different awareness or sophistication levels of your audience that we're going to take them through. So it's really good to understand. So again, unaware means somebody that knows nothing about Ray, Audience Lab, PDOCS, Sales Lab, marketing, said nothing about me or what I do. If I'm going to try to relate to that guy, I'm going to create a story-based lead. And I'll tell you an example of how I use this. So I go through certain times where I'll kind of go through a blast of how many friends I accept or how many friend requests, and I add a bunch of new people onto my Facebook profile, onto my LinkedIn, doesn't matter. Once I knew I've just got a whole bunch of new followers or new friends, I'm going to start with some more story-based content to hit the new people on my audience. Now, the most aware people at the end of this that have been following me forever, that know everything about me, they're going to tune that post out and scroll right by it. And I know that, but that's fine, because why are they going to want to hear the story of somebody that they know everything about and they probably know everything in that post? I'm creating with the objective to hit an unaware audience. And I know just recently I had, added a bunch of friends or a bunch of new followers to my page. That's where I might use that. Problem aware, again, means they're starting to realize they have a problem. My cost per lead is too high, not enough closes, not enough sales, not enough revenue, whatever it is, a mainstream problem. If I'm trying to appeal to that audience, I would either use a proclamation lead or sometimes even a secret lead. Any of these that kind of fall right in the middle, a secret lead is really good type of lead type for both a problem aware and a solution aware audience. What does solution aware mean? It means that they're aware of the problem and they're actively starting to search for solutions, right? But they're probably not as far as product aware, meaning that they've hopped on sales calls, that they know that they can do it themselves, do it with you, do it for you, right? That's when you start to become product aware. So solution aware is like, okay, I'm aware of the problem, and they start to look for solutions, and they probably start to get hit with what we would call mainstream solutions, which in many cases, us as more boutique data providers or providers agencies can do a lot better job than the big mainstream solution. So that's why we would use maybe a problem solution lead to that audience or to a product aware. Again, product aware means they're actively out there booking calls. They're landing on checkout pages. They're looking at the different options, do it yourself, done for you, done with you, et cetera, et cetera. Then most aware, I could just make direct offer leads. Hey, 20% if you sign up today. That's somebody that's been on my time, that's been through all my ads, it's been in my email campaigns forever. I can go very direct and just give a discount or an offer based post. Again, can I make an offer based post to somebody that's totally unaware, knows nothing about me? Hell no, that would be stupid. That's going to convert at about the least percentage of any offer I could ever run. So throughout our content, our sales process, and you guys see me talk about this when you go through my micro commitment process, and number 1 and 2 in the document I've already provided you in the chat here today. I talk about that in a little more depth, but really understanding the awareness levels and then what type of lead type, hook, angle, or headline is really going to relate to that type of audience. Very, very important. I've got this down so much, like I'll go look at a Facebook group and let's say, part of what I did in the past, and I still do to some extent, is I'll utilize Facebook groups for engagement. So I'll be able to tell really quickly by going in there and just looking at what people are posting about, what's getting engagement. Okay, this is a lower sophistication group, a lot of newcomers. Okay, this has some hitters and they're talking about advanced marketing stuff, and that's going to dictate how I'm going to go in there and create my post and my lead type. So that's kind of what I wanted to cover. Before I go check the chat and any questions, Will, your hand's already raised. Why don't you go ahead and unmute, ask your question first, and then I'm going to go check the chat here shortly.
Hey, Ray. So I'm wondering if there would be any ways you would change your wording if based on how much a business is making in revenue. Like, what would you say to a company making, let's say, like 25 million a year in revenue versus 200?
Yeah, no, there's certainly difference. It's tough right on the spot. I'll try to answer. I like to do a little
Yeah, I
research
get you.
before I would finalize this. But again, I would say something I would allude to so if I'm talking to the 25 million company, I would allude to, hey, have you ever wondered why there's companies out there doing 200 million in your same niche like X, Y, and Z company, but you're unable to get there? And then on the flip side of things, when I'm reaching out to a $200 million company, hey, you must know you have a lot of competitors nipping at your heels to become the category king, and they're all trying to come at you and steal some of your clients, right? What if I can show you a way to get a lower customer acquisition cost? So a lot of times I'm going to leverage that higher or lower competitor to them and say, hey, you got people nipping at your heels. Do you want to stay miles ahead of them? Or vice versa. You're miles behind this guy. You want me to show you the competitive advantage so you can catch up to them and be in the same ballpark?
Okay, that makes sense.
But again, that's without doing any research or knowing the specifics behind it.
Yeah, I know that was a pretty broad question.
Yeah, again, I can give broad answers to broad questions.
I get you. Thank you, though.
Cool. I don't know am I pronouncing this right? Is it Chawi? I'm not sure. You put a 1 in the comments. You wanted to ask a question? Is he
Yeah,
still on? Okay, there you are.
yeah, awesome. So I guess I'm taking a little step back here. I'm new to this whole audience lab system, or to essentially doing any sort of DaaS. And I'm just wondering, for somebody who's just started, who doesn't necessarily have experience or case studies, I know we can use like a lot of the case studies from Audience Lab, but whether the question came up from a prospect that sounds along the lines of, okay, how do you have access to that data? What is the data, right? Like in a way, trying to It's like you might be speaking with the CMO of a company who's like been
Sure.
trying
So
to
they're
get,
asking, just so I
right?
understand you right, correct me if I'm wrong. You're
Yeah.
trying to say if you get a question from a prospect asking, where's this data actually aggregated from and where does it come from to start? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, and like sort of like I'm the CMO of this decent business, and I don't have access to that. Like, how do you, some random guy who's like just starting up, have access to data that's gonna improve my business X amount, right?
Yeah, it's a
Like,
great question. And through my network and my connections, I actually have access and was able to sign a license agreement with the top data provider in this space. So right now I have access to a super graph with top tier data only normally open to, the Fortune 500 companies through this licensing agreement I signed. So I am able to get you in market intent based first party data that we can upload into advertising and marketing campaigns to get better results.
right. And what is the name of that provider?
I have a non-disclosure agreement with that provider. I would really not like to say the name because I've become the data provider by signing that agreement. So my NDA doesn't actually allow me to speak with the data provider. That they made me sign an agreement when I signed the licensing fee. If you'd like to find your own data provider, I mean, feel free to go ahead and look through that. But I pay a hefty monthly fee for a license, so I can provide it to you guys at a manageable retail cost.
Got it.
That's
Yeah.
how I'd handle it.
Yeah, I mean that essentially covers it.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a very good question. I would never, if I'm you guys, and I think Sam, I think you and I were talking about this the other day, if I'm not mistaken. I would never say Audience Lab is where I get the data from, and I don't want you guys to be saying that. We want to work with agencies. We want you guys to have. We don't advertise to. We don't market to, and we rarely sell to individual brands or advertisers, guys. That's not our target market. We go to you guys because we are the platform. We wholesale it to you at a very affordable price. You can go retail it, and everybody makes a buck. And so we're not even targeting the same market. We don't want your people. And if I'm one of you guys, a DaaS agency, I'm never referring my white label partner is.
Yeah, that makes sense. Will we have access to that recording? Because I definitely want to kind of circle back and kind of
This recording?
nitpick your response.
Sure. This recording, again, I upload to the school community. Again, we have two school communities, just to be sure. Make sure if you are an Audience Lab user, which you should be if you're on this call,
Yeah.
you're in the private school community with about
Yeah.
500 or 600 members, not the larger one with maybe 2,000. Within that
Yeah.
one, each day, within 2 hours after the call, I go and post the replay. So it'll be in there, and I can send you the link directly if you'd want, where you can pull the transcript and pull out what I said word for word.
Fantastic. Would that be posted like on the main
I posted
page
in the
or?
main, but in the subcategory, it's DaaS. So if I was to go in there, I'll just show you real quick. Give me 1 second, just so anybody can know, if you're looking. Let me just screen share again, and I'll answer that and make that very clear. So, I mean, that's a good question because it's hard to explain without showing it to you. This browser, this school. So within here, we have all these subcategories, right? So I always post mine in the DaaS. So you'll find it quicker if you go here. And isn't there, why am I not seeing it now? Just because I said it? There should be a DaaS one, unless something just changed this week. You can even search by, though. You can even search by who posted it. So you can just go up and type my name in the search, and anything I posted would be in here. But normally it asks me to pick a subcategory. I don't know why I'm not seeing it here. But every one, even last week's, I know I put in the DaaS category. But if I'm going to scroll down just to show you, I guess it depends how many people click on it, how far it falls down. Yeah, it would be. I could have swore though we have our own DaaS column, and it's just, with my luck, it's just not showing up. But yeah, again, same day. Now the last one I posted was a week ago, right? So it's going to be a little ways back. But if you look the same day, you should be able to find it right on the first page. There's the last one. Okay, so they changed it to sales. This used to be a DaaS category. Somebody in my admin changed it to sales.
Got
Okay,
it.
so now if you're looking for any of mine, it would be up here at the top of the category. It would say sales, not DaaS. Okay, so they just changed it. So if you click sales, that's going to show you any of my posts and any of my replays right in there.
Got it.
And again, usually these end around 4 Eastern, 4 p.m. I usually have them uploaded by about 6 p.m. the replay.
Okay, that's cool. Second quick question. What are your thoughts on running cold email using the in-market, like if you want to build an in-market, not for clients, but for us to actually
Yeah,
sell
yeah, yeah.
DaaS services.
Another thing Sam
What
and I
are
were
your
talking
thoughts on
about on
that?
his one-on-one call the other day. I think it's a good idea, and I think you really just got to make sure that your messaging is dialed in, and it's going to do what I kind of talked about on today's lesson. It's going to poke somebody and make them problem aware, or elicit engagement and intrigue and create a response. So, cold email outreach is a great way to land your first couple of clients. I've seen the best organic methods I've seen from our DaaS clients has been a combination of LinkedIn and cold email. Do some people also do Instagram or Facebook or whatever? Yes, but the two avenues for organic client generation that I've seen work the best for our DaaS clients have been cold email and LinkedIn. But if you have shit messaging or shit headlines and you're not getting opens, it's going to be about as effective as a shit message. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So really
That
just
makes
dial in
sense.
your messaging, but it's a really good, if you got the right audience and you're able to get those emails from our database, much better than some of the past methods of scraping and hoping that the things are even hitting the right person, right? You're going to have a lot more success as long as your messaging is solid.
Got it. And if you're building audiences like pre-made, could you recommend some categories that would sort of encompass a good in-market for that service?
I think that's a much better question to ask my guys on the office hours workshop. I rarely go in the platform and build audiences. So
Got it.
because I do it so little, it's not my expertise. I'd rather you ask somebody that's doing it daily. They're going to be able to answer that much more, accurately than myself.
Okay, cool. Thanks,
But we run
Raymond.
office hours workshops 3 times a week. Those guys can handle that, and they do that all day, every day. So again, I'd rather the guy on my team that handles that give you the answer than me guessing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Heidi, great question there. Have the sales deck been updated for V3? I don't believe so, but actually, that's a great point. I have a team meeting immediately after this. So I put that on my agenda to hit with the team. I will DM you an answer back. And as soon as we have it, I'll make an announcement. But I'll DM you an answer end of day or early tomorrow, regardless with that. Great question. Alrighty, guys. Yeah, 3 minutes to go. I would like the PDF. Guys, whoever would like it, just because I only have a couple minutes and I don't want to jot down every name, but whoever would like the PDF, just DM me within school. That would be the easiest way for me to keep track of it and make sure I get it to you. Shoot me a DM in school. Hey, Ray, I want that breakthrough advertising book or PDF. Just shoot me a message. I'll make sure I get it over to you. Awesome. All right, guys. Yeah, like I said, 2 minutes left. I am gonna appreciate that as well. Sam. I'm gonna hop off, go prep for my next call, and I'll have the replay uploaded soon. And Heidi, I'll have an answer back to you today or tomorrow. All right, guys. Appreciate it. We'll see you all next week. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.